This is something that has been on my mind for a few weeks now, but it's something that I have observed since I, started becoming more involved working with and serving women and their children. And that is how much we as women can stunt the growth of another woman sometimes when we get in a position of power. Okay? I think power is exactly what it is. It can be such a stronghold if you haven't built the character needed to carry it, okay? Because it comes with a lot of responsibility, And I think we all have to learn that. Nobody is exempt from, when they get into positions of power, access, and connected to an enormous amount of resources. Nobody is exempt from being tested, their ego getting tested. It is human nature. That's why it is important for us to have wise counsel around us, people around us who will keep us sober-minded, right? So nobody is exempt from this. But I'm talking from an aspect when it starts to hurt the very people that you say you represent, right? And if you represent that people group, so like I am a woman who supports women. It would be harmful for me to use whatever little access that I have, whatever little bit of, whatever resources or as I grow in power, access, and influence and resources and things like that. It would be detrimental to the people I serve if I use it to hinder and not even be aware of it. So when I talk to women, when I serve women, these are things that we talk about. These are things that we bring up. And I have to bring it up because if we don't deal with the things that have hurt us, we perpetuate it on other people. So one of the biggest things to do is to be aware. We have to be aware when we are doing it, and we have to be humble enough to receive when someone comes to us and say, hey, you're kind of acting like the very people who hurt you. Maybe you should get some additional counseling or support. So I see this a lot with women in power, and I'm just putting it out there. But then what happens when you have women in power, or when we finally get in these positions and we step on the neck of another woman because we feel intimidated or we feel threatened or what? It hinders the progress we say we want to be a part of. Now, I'm sorry, I'm just not of the belief of, like I don't believe in saying, let's push back on this, let's push back on the narrative of this or that. Well, if that narrative is true, well, let's call a spade first. And the only way we can push back on the narrative and dispel it is calling it out first. So I think one of the things that hinder the kind of work that I do in serving women and teaching other women how to be supportive of other women is calling out when it happens. Calling it out when it happens. Because it's a great disservice. Is pretending like something doesn't exist, or pretend like something is not a problem when it really is a problem. And when we refuse to talk about how we perpetuate trauma and issues. I kid you not, when working in a space with adult mentorship, focusing on women, I've heard so many stories of women not trusting one another because of what another woman has done to them. And in the beginning, I used to say, well, I want to, we can get along. Women, we can get along. We can do this. We can do that. We can, how how we see men get along and just kind of, be a little more supportive of each other. Now, it is possible. And there are relationships, you hear, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, talk about her relationships and her friendships and how healthy and supportive her friendships are and the women around her are. It is possible, Oprah and Gail, it is possible to have healthy female relationships. And honestly, it's important. It is essential to have healthy female relationships. And for women to have other supportive women in your circles. That is possible. But we can't forget about when an unhealthy relationship impacts, a collective. Now, this I'm specifically speaking to when a woman gets in a position of power and she knowingly or unknowingly uses her power or influence to set back another woman. It's happened to me countless times. A lot of the women that I'm connected to and serve have stories and how it has impacted them so much. And you wouldn't believe the amount of work that it takes to build that trust back in another woman so that they can see, and because I've had to do it for myself. It takes a lot of work to build back trust, in women, specifically a woman in power or a woman with access and influence. It takes a lot of effort to recognize that was your lived experience, but not every single woman that you encounter is like that. How to have a healthy relationship, how important it is to have a healthy relationship with yourself so that you can recognize and have healthy relationships with other women so that you can recognize what that feels like, what that looks like moving forward. But I have to say this because I still run into it a lot. So much so, almost every other woman that I build a relationship with, they've had that issue. And they have the same stories of a woman in power knocking down another woman. So I'm not only on a mission to dispel the myth that women can't get along and can't genuinely support one another, but I'm also being honest with the fact that it does happen, and it creates a huge setback when it comes to women empowerment when we do that to each other. It really does. So what I do for myself, because it's happened to me so many times, like I said, it doesn't feel good. The setback doesn't feel good, So I make it a point to keep healthy women around me who I know genuinely care for my well-being and my progress, to keep honest about my blind spots, and I think we all really should do it. I think it's one of the biggest contradictions is when we have been victims of something and we turn around and we become the perpetuator. So we're both. And the only way we can prevent from being both is when we, once again, keep healthy people around us who will be honest with us, so that we don't hurt other people. I come across way too many women who have been hurt by other women when they were in positions of power or influence. Not good. It's not good for us, especially when we need each other. We need healthy connections with other women. But when we take our positions and we sabotage potential relationships or another woman's potential growth, what do you think that does to us as a collective? So I'm just putting it out there because it's kind of overwhelming hearing about it, and it's even more overwhelming when you see how we show up in one another's lives, how we show up in our communities, how we show up in the workspace because of that. That's my thought of the day. I'm gonna finish working. I have so much work to do. I have a cohort to prepare for tomorrow. I love teaching and serving and facilitating groups on the well-being and the overall health and wellness of women. So, I hope this comes across as nothing less than my passion. I just want to see us do better so that we can be more supportive of one another as moms, as co-workers, and things like that. So that's it. Happy Friday. I'm not gonna, beat down this subject, but this subject is so important to me because of the work that I do, because of the damage I've seen when, a person in power, specifically when a woman in power, because we are also considered a vulnerable group, and especially if you are a Black woman or a woman of color, we're even more, vulnerable. We have a lot of hurdles that we have to climb over in our lives already. I'm not trying to beat down the situation, but it's been weighing so heavy on me. And I don't like to look at situations without looking at myself first, right? Simply because, like I said earlier, oftentimes a person who is a victim of something, if you don't recognize how that situation has impacted you, it is very easy to perpetuate the same injustice, right? I kid you not. If I ask any woman who has experienced a setback or some sort of traumatic situation with another woman or in the hands of a woman, another woman in position of power, they can tell you how it impacted them, and maybe it still even impacts them. But we rarely spend the time we need to recognize how we have impacted others for every minute, and for every day that we are unaware, for every day that we don't choose to forgive and heal and show up better despite of, is a day that you are at risk of hurting, someone else, perpetuating that issue of, perpetuating whatever issue was put on you, whatever, pain you were subject to at the hands of another woman. So for every day you don't deal with that is a day that you are potentially a threat to another woman. And that's the reality of it. Even myself, I really can't honestly say who all got caught in the crossfire of my pain because someone hurt me, because I was offended, or hurt or set back, So, I mean, this is a conversation that can go really deep, really fast for me. And I just don't feel like diving all the way into it. My biggest thing is that making sure we are aware that we're not doing it to other people. It's easy for us to recognize our victimhood, and it is very difficult for us to recognize how we perpetuate what has been inflicted on us. It just is what it is. It's a blind spot that it takes people and situations to reveal that to you and reveal that to us. I am no different. I am no better. I'm talking from a space of not just book knowledge, but personal experience. A lot of times we don't know the pain and the offenses we inflict on other people until we've overcome those issues and have forgiven it. And, and it's like, what, I accept what happened and I'm ready to move on. And then you get, you walk in that next phase of healing. Then we become aware of how offensive we were when we were victims, right? So all of this stuff we unpack, when we do our cohorts, when I'm facilitating groups. It gets pretty deep. It gets pretty, messy. But at the end of the program, people have a greater appreciation for the healing process. And they recognize the significance of what it means to show up better and the work that we have to do that, and how to stop perpetuating the things that were inflicted on us. So, and that even goes for people who lead in any capacity, especially people who lead in any capacity, people who have access, who are in positions of power, access, power, influence, and access to resources. Whatever you inflict on another person is more impactful because the position that you sit in. So we do need to look at that. We do need to see ourselves first. We do need to sit back and say, how am I part of the problem? Or if I'm part of the problem, if I am a part of the solution. A lot of times we're a part of the problem simply because we aren't even aware of ourselves. I kid you not. Self-awareness is not something that we're always born with. So it's something that has to be learned a lot of times. So couple lack of self-awareness with being in a position of power and never really dealing with the things that have hurt you, the people who have hurt you, the women who have hurt you. And then you are leading a women's group. Now, of course, you can apply the same concept to any situation. Men do it, but that's not my specialty. My specialty is focusing on women and their children. That is my area of expertise. That is what I have the longest history in doing as a professional, is serving underserved women and their children, specifically underserved minority women and their children. So I'm not saying that there's not a problem in any other people group and there's not a problem amongst men and things like that. This is the subject that I'm on today. But if someone happens to take this and say that it can be, and see it in another aspect, of course.
Y'all, my video got cut short, unfortunately, but the gist of what I was trying to say is making sure that we as women, when we get in positions of power or have positions of influence or are connected to resources, that we don't use that to paralyze or hinder the growth of another woman. Of course, of anyone. We shouldn't be doing it to anybody, but we also have to keep ourselves in check in order to make sure that we're not doing that. You don't want to be the person who has been a victim of abusing their power and therefore stunted your growth. But then the moment you get in the position, you do the same thing because you haven't really truly healed from who hurt you and who have offended you. So these things are very important, and these things are needed. We have to talk about these things in order for us to truly move forward and truly be women who empower other women.